Annoyingly, the racing world decided to get very, very interesting just as I became far too busy to make videos due to the amount of schoolwork and that sort of stuff that's going on. But finally, I've been able to make some time to talk about probably one of the most interesting stories that has broken over the past couple of weeks, and that is, of course, the situation with Sergio Perez. Now, Sebastian Vettel was announced obviously earlier in the year that he was leaving Scuderia Ferrari, and there were rumors developing over quite a long time that he could be going to what is now Racing Point and soon to be Aston Martin Racing for next year. And finally, that has materialized. It was announced that Sebastian Vettel would be going to Aston Martin Racing for 2021. And, well, I think it was fairly obvious who was going to get the chop in that particular situation, and that was Sergio Perez. Obviously, you know, a lot of people are talking about, oh, you know, is Sebastian Vettel the right man for the job for Aston Martin? I think it was a good move. I think, you know, the prospect of having a 4-time world champion on a team like Aston Martin, you know, that does wonders, and that was obviously an offer that was too tempting to pass up. You know, arguably you could have said, oh, you know, it would have been better to put, maybe if you wanted a new driver, put George Russell in that seat. But I think, you know, Sebastian Vettel's good for the brand image, and I think he's really going to give that team a boost. And, I mean, a lot of people are saying this is a good thing. A lot of people, I'm guessing quite a few people say this is a bad thing. But I'm actually more concerned now with what is Sergio Perez's future in in motorsport in general. What's the rest of his career going to look like? And that is what we are discussing in today's video. I think there are 5 possible scenarios that I could see playing out for Sergio Perez, and we're going to go. This is sort of an impromptu talk that I'm doing. I don't actually have a proper script for this, so I'm just sort of, you know, I have a couple of notes and that's it. But I'm just going to discuss pretty much the 5 options that I think Sergio Perez can pick from for next year and possibly the rest of his racing career. Option 1, move to Alfa Romeo for 2021 to replace Kimi Räikkönen. Now, while Alfa Romeo may not be the most appealing drive in Formula 1 at the moment, it is a team on the grid, and I reckon, you know, once Ferrari sort their issues with their engine out, they might be able to sort of make their way back up the grid, and, you know, we'll see what happens in 2022 with the rule change to see where they place. But obviously Alfa Romeo is a spot on the grid, and you know, it might just be good just to keep him in the sport. Now, arguably they say, oh, you know, that's a good thing because he could move up to Ferrari, but I don't think he's going to get that seat, because at some point, Mick Schumacher is inevitably going to end up in Formula 1, and if a seat opens up at Ferrari, Mick Schumacher is probably going to get that seat every single time. But regardless, he could move to Alfa Romeo for 2021 to replace Kimi Räikkönen. Now, when Kimi Räikkönen joined what was then Sauber for the 2019 season, he signed a 2-year contract, and that contract comes to an end this year, meaning that seat's going to be open. The other thing you could do is, if Kimi Räikkönen signs on, then this would be pretty unlikely, but they could fire Antonio Giovinazzi, who people have come to call Italian Jesus, which I find pretty entertaining. I think Josh Ravel calls him that, which is, I think is pretty funny. But I don't see Giovinazzi being fired, because in the Ferrari stable, he has an advantage that not too many racing drivers have, and that is he is Italian. So I think they'll be sort of reluctant to fire him. But I think what a lot of people are sort of hoping is going to happen is that for 2021 or into the future at some point, it will be Sergio Perez and Mick Schumacher on the Alfa Romeo lineup. So that is one option that I could see happening, just to keep Sergio Perez in the sport. Moving on to option 2. Now, I actually think this would probably be the best option. Personally, I think Sergio Perez, he's a good driver in Formula 1. He gets good results, and he's good in the midfield, but his career's never really gone anywhere. It's just sort of been stagnant, and I feel like if he was going to get a top drive, he would sort of have gotten one by now, and that's just not happened. He's always just I mean, he did have a run at McLaren, but it was probably not the greatest time for him, and now he's just, spent years in midfield teams and has never been able to get into proper equipment. And personally, I don't ever see him getting into proper equipment, that's just an unfortunate fact. There's not, there aren't enough competitive seats in Formula One for Sergio Perez to get a top drive. So I think if he were to stay in Formula One, his talents would sort of be wasted because his career just wouldn't really go anywhere. Obviously, Perez is Formula One worthy. The sport just hasn't treated him nice, and I just think he's more or less stuck if he stays in Formula One. So what I would recommend that he does, and it doesn't actually seem all that impossible. I mean, then again, nothing is really impossible in motorsport, but I could see this happening actually. Option number 2 is that he goes to IndyCar for next year. Now, you might be asking, where do I think he's going to go in IndyCar? Well, I think Sergio Perez might end up in either in a third car, either full or part-time for McLaren Schmidt-Peterson Motorsport, or if nothing else, he ends up as a seat warmer for the 66 car that runs at the Indianapolis 500, just while Fernando Alonso is not able to do the 500 and is doing Formula One with what is soon to be Alpine, actually, or Alpine, depending on how you want to say it. But I can actually see that happening. Now, it's probably not going to be quite a few of the top teams that you would expect in IndyCar. It's not going to be Penske because Penske's stable's kind of full. It's not going to be Andretti because their stable's more or less full as well. And it's not going to be Chip Ganassi either because they're already running 3 cars full-time, and with the addition of Jimmy Johnson part-time and a 4th car next year, their stable is pretty much full. I could see it working at McLaren Schmidt-Peterson Motorsport. They're a team on the up, and they might decide that it's the right time to run a third car, either full or part-time, next season. And, well, if nothing, as I said, if nothing else, they could run Sergio Perez part-time, and if nothing else, they run him at the 566 car, just to keep some interest in that 66 car, and just to keep sort of the European Formula One interest on McLaren and IndyCar. So I could see that happening, and it's not the first time that a Formula One driver just, the circumstances weren't right in Formula Ones that have come to race in IndyCar. Obviously, the most recent person to do so was Marcus Ericsson racing for Chip Ganassi Racing. And you never know, Perez could come over, he could, do a few races with Aaron McLaren Schmidt-Peterson, and then go back to Europe if the opportunity arises. But I think if he were to get a McLaren drive in IndyCar, he'd be really putting his talents to good use, as he could probably help take that team to the front. And I reckon he'll probably find a bit more success in IndyCar than he will in Formula One. Option number 3 is a potential Formula E drive. Obviously, we've seen a lot of Formula One drivers in recent years, and a lot of drivers whose the circumstances just didn't work out come over to Formula E. We've had Felipe Massa come over after he retired from Formula One. We've had Nick de Vries. We've had Stoffel van Dorn. And, well, there are quite a few seats open for next year in Formula E. I think Venturi's open, and a few other guys are open as well. I think there's a free seat at DS Cheetah still. I'm not sure if they put Perez in that seat, but anyway, there's a few seats open in Formula E at the moment. And while it probably wouldn't help him with his Formula One career, you take what you can get. So perhaps a Formula E drive could be on the cards for Sergio Perez next year and beyond. Option number 4, maybe a run in sports car racing might be Perez's thing. Sports car racing is going through a bit of a transitional period at the moment. We're going to have the hypercars coming in, and of course, if you want a drive in sports car racing of some kind, there's an abundance of LMP2 drives around the place. So if Perez wanted one, I'm sure anybody would be willing to take him. He's just got to find the right opportunity in sports car racing, and I don't think he'd be too bored in sports car racing because those cars are pretty quick. And I reckon Perez would be a pretty good endurance driver. Just something about him. It's like Nico Hülkenberg was a pretty good endurance driver, and Perez, in some respects, reminds me of Nico Hülkenberg. I don't know what it is. It just sort of reminds me of him. Maybe it's because they both drove at Force India for a period of time. So maybe Perez would be more suited to sports car racing, and he could go do that for a year. Option number 5 is take a year off and wait for a seat to open up. This is what Esteban Ocon did, and I think this is what Nico Hülkenberg is trying to do as well, although it's not going particularly well for Nico Hülkenberg, even though he did get a drive with Racing Point as well. Maybe that's what actually reminded me of Hülkenberg when thinking of Sergio Perez. You know, as I said, it's what Esteban Ocon did. He waited a year and he eventually did get that drive with Renault. Maybe that's what Sergio Perez will do, and see what sort of drives open up. But personally, I wouldn't recommend that he goes for this, because I feel like he's just sort of wasting his time with that, because at the best of times, if he just waits a year, he ends up being a test driver, and I'm not sure anybody really wants to see him do that. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments below. I do actually read all of the comments, so you may as well say something. Which of these scenarios do you think is the most likely, or do you have an alternate scenario that you think Sergio Perez will, well, alternate path that Sergio Perez will go down? Comment below. I'm interested to see what you all have to say. I just want to give you a quick channel update. I've been really busy with stuff at the moment, just relating to school, so I haven't been able to get a video out for a couple of weeks now, and I might not be able to get a video out for maybe a couple more weeks, because I've got more exams coming up. But once those exams are over, I do have some pretty cool plans. Obviously, I have the Project Cars 3 review coming out. That's all written and ready to go. I have a history video coming out as well, which I'm really excited to release, and I also have another project in the works, so stay tuned for that. And that's it. Like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.